When a man truly begins to awaken, his steps naturally drift away from crowd. Not because he despises people, but because the ordinary ways of connecting begin to feel hollow. He starts to notice that most conversations circle around gossip, complaints, and comparisons. And once his eyes open to that reality, it becomes difficult to engage the way he once did. He is not bitter, nor does he isolate himself out of arrogance. He simply no longer wants to chase what everyone else is still chasing. Gradually, he starts to see the subtle performances hidden in everyday interactions. The desire to be liked, the effort to belong, the pressure to say the right thing. Without making an announcement, without seeking attention, he quietly takes a step back. People still greet him. They still exchange pleasantries, but inside, he knows the bond was never truly there. He has not cut ties. He has not burned bridges. He has simply stopped pretending. And the moment pretense ends, distance begins to grow. This distance is not loneliness. It is solitude. It is the space between the man he used to be and the man he is becoming. He begins to see clearly that much of what holds people together is not truth, but habit. It is not depth, but comfort. Shared illusions disguised as connection. People cling to each other by complaining about their lives, defending borrowed beliefs, and chasing a false sense of importance. He once played along in the same way, believing that this was what connection meant. But now, those conversations feel like empty echoes. He notices how often people talk only to avoid silence, how desperately they chase validation, agreement, and reassurance. And because he no longer needs those things, he begins to see how fragile most bonds really are. Many relationships survive not because of honesty, but because everyone silently agrees to keep the same story alive. He understands why people cling to it. It feels safe, it feels familiar, but he no longer feels compelled to play his part. That small shift in him creates distance all on its own. On the outside, he looks unchanged. He still shows up. He still smiles politely. He still engages in basic courtesies. But beneath the surface, something fundamental has shifted, and others sense it even if they cannot name it. They feel that he is no longer trying to impress, no longer waiting for approval, no longer engaging in the unspoken games of belonging. Some admire this change. Others find it unsettling, because when a man stops performing, he becomes harder to read. He doesn't flatter, doesn't compete, doesn't try to entertain, and that makes him difficult to place in the roles people expect. They whisper that he has changed, that he has grown too quiet, too distant, perhaps even cold. But the truth is, he has only stopped reflecting what others wanted to see. He no longer plays the mirror for their values. Now he reflects something else, something rooted, steady, and unshaken by opinion. People may see him, but they no longer truly know him. To know him now would require them to step outside their own illusions, and most are not ready for that. He once believed that to remain connected meant constant involvement, showing up, joining conversations, filling every silence, keeping up appearances. But as his awareness grew, that definition dissolved. He no longer engages out of obligation, not because he cares less, but because he no longer relies on others to confirm his place in the world. He still values connection, but only when it is real, when it doesn't demand performance, validation, or emotional transactions. To those still caught in shallow bonds, his presence feels distant. But in truth, he is closer to himself than ever. He no longer speaks simply to fill the air. He no longer bends himself to keep peace. He no longer measures his worth through the eyes of others. And in that silence, something new grows, clarity. From the outside, it looks like withdrawal. But from within, it feels like arriving at solid ground. What others interpret as loneliness is, in fact, strength. It is not the absence of company. It is the presence of truth. To most people, solitude is misunderstood. They equate being alone with lack of friends, lack of belonging, lack of purpose. But when a man awakens, solitude takes on an entirely different meaning. He no longer fills his days with distractions to escape himself. He no longer seeks constant company to avoid silence. Instead, he learns to sit quietly, without rushing, and discovers that silence is not emptiness at all. It is peace. In that stillness, illusions begin to unravel. He realizes that much of what once felt urgent, status, competition, endless conversation, was nothing more than noise. Alone, there is no audience, no stage, and therefore, no master wear. At first, this clarity feels sharp, even uncomfortable. But soon, it becomes a foundation of his strength. This shift confuses others. They misinterpret his calm as arrogance, his silence as judgment, his detachment as disinterest. But he is none of those things. He has simply stopped shaping himself for the comfort of others. What most people call connection is often nothing more than a performance, a series of gestures designed to keep illusions alive. When he steps out of that performance, the entire structure collapses. He doesn't argue. He doesn't provoke. He doesn't try to persuade anyone. But by no longer offering the usual signals, validation, flattery, false reassurance, he disrupts the rhythm. Friendships fade, not because of conflict, but because the ground they stood on no longer exists. He no longer joins in endless complaints. He no longer nods along to conversations without meaning. And he no longer sacrifices truth just to belong. This is not rejection. It is a rebalancing of energy. He still values people, but not at the cost of authenticity. True friendship becomes rare, but infinitely more real. No longer built on habit or need, but on recognition. Two souls walking side by side, not because they need each other, but because they choose to. These connections cannot be forced. They only emerge when both people no longer seek completion in one another. Until then, he walks alone. He understands now that most social rules run on quiet agreements. I'll affirm your story if you affirm mine. I'll pretend to agree if you do the same. We won't go too deep. We won't disturb the dream. He once followed those rules because everyone else did. But once he stepped beyond them, he realized he could never return. He no longer trades honesty for comfort. He no longer gives empty reassurances to smooth tension. He no longer shrinks himself just to fit in. Because of that, many step away. Not out of hatred, but because they cannot follow where he's gone. The clearer he becomes, the quieter his life gets. He needs less recognition, less reassurance, less company for the sake of company. Without those cravings, most relationships lose their weight. From the outside, it looks like withdrawal, but inside it feels like freedom. He is not absent. He is fully present, but no longer performing. At some point, solitude stops feeling unusual. It becomes natural. Not emptiness, but stillness. Not isolation, but peace. He no longer chases the warmth of illusions. He no longer mistakes noise for connection. He no longer measures himself through the lens of others. And in that freedom, he discovers something rare. Not loneliness, not coldness, but the unshakable strength of being whole within himself. He sees now what others cannot. He looks inward, and the noise grows quiet. He looks outward, and he sees a world still asleep. Roles being performed, borrowed beliefs defended, endless movement disguising an inner stillness people haven't touched. He no longer envies what others call connection, because he understands the cost. To belong often demands conformity. To be accepted often demands illusion, and he refuses to trade truth for comfort. Still, a part of him remembers. A part quietly hopes, not for crowds, not for company, but for someone awake. Someone who has seen what he has seen, felt what he has felt. Someone who does not need him to be smaller, quieter, or more agreeable to feel safe. That kind of meeting is rare. It cannot be forced. It may never come. But he would rather walk alone in silence than pretend in company. So he walks alone, not because he enjoys separation, but because in a world still dreaming, authenticity is more valuable than acceptance. He does not see distance as a problem to solve. He sees it as a natural result of no longer pretending. Others surround themselves with noise. He has learned to live in stillness. Many chase attention. He moves quietly without asking to be seen. People assume he must be lonely, as if any company is better than solitude, but they confuse absence with presence. He is not absent. He is deeply here, only no longer performing. This is the final shift. He doesn't need the world to wake up for him to feel whole. He doesn't need agreement to feel clear. He doesn't need validation to know who he is. He walks alone, yes, but not as an exile, not as an outsider. He walks alone as a man at peace with the cost of truth.